Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about being an expert. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, when do you know that you are an expert in a given programming language? And I think this is a good question, and it's also an almost impossible question to answer in a non-subjective way, but I will give it a try, and I will try my best, and I will see where this ends up. Usually it ends up with quite a lot of people disagreeing, but that's hopefully okay. Anywho, so the first thing I will argue that we need to just agree on when it comes to this term expert is to talk about what does this actually mean, because the definition of this is very important in order for this to make any sense for me. So one person will, a viewpoint that is very common when we're talking about this idea of being an expert, being a professional, being something, right? Being the best, being whatever, is what do you actually, how do you define that? What does it mean to actually be an expert? Does it mean that you are the inventor of this, like let's in a programming language situation? Does it mean that you invented the language? Does it mean that you are one of the core contributors to the language? Does it mean that you are one of the world's most renowned programmers in this language? Does it mean that you are a core contributor to the standards? Are you on a committee of some sort? Are you an evangelist of this language? Or does it actually mean, like, how big should your investment be? Does it mean that you have been working for a certain amount of years? Does it mean that you know all the syntax? What does it mean? And that's something that I think needs to be defined here. So if I will give you my definition, I want us to think about this term of being an expert in a very similar way to, if you watched all the old Kung Fu movies, you will know that from Kung Fu culture, you used to have this concept called a master. You had a master. Now, what is a master? That's the same problem. What is a master martial arts practitioner? Does that mean that one person defeats every single other practitioner out there? No. It means that they have reached a level of seniority where there's really only a smaller subset of all the practitioners out there who can act at their skill level. There might be people who are even better than them, even a smaller clique of masters, but that doesn't mean that they can't have their own school, that they don't have students and so forth, and they have different ways and different, they practice different styles of martial arts or Kung Fu. And this is exactly how I think about when you can know whether or not you're an expert. Being an expert doesn't mean that you are one of the world's most famous programmers, which a lot of people on the internet, and I just presume that these are people which aren't all that versed in, I'm not going to say life, because that might be too condescending, but something along those lines. Because if your belief system is that the only thing that can make you an expert in something, or that expert is just a byword for being on YouTube or something like that, and being one of the head spokespeople in an organization for something, then I think that then then the vast majority of people are not experts in anything. And the fact of the matter is that there's quite a lot of people out there in the world who are extremely good. They are considered experts in their fields without necessarily being famous for it. And this is true in quite a lot of areas of the world, like in many professions and areas of study. And that's the definition I'm going to go with. So I will argue that you are an expert in your language when you have gotten over a certain threshold. In other words, when your skill level matches up with people, like with a smaller group of people, your understanding of a language is actually at your extent of your understanding is so great that you don't really learn so much from talking with people who don't have as much experience as you do. You don't really gain anything from interacting just with regular programmers who may be either more like, as I said, they don't have the experience or not the same level of interest or something like that. If you can measure it in a similar fashion to how many questions do you have to your coworkers and how many questions do they have to you, and you will start to see, this is natural in anything. And when you start as a beginner, it's the same thing. You're all helping out each other as juniors, and then you grow up and you become seniors, and then the seniors are going to help you out and you're going to help the juniors, and then if you progress even further, you're going to be considered to, within your own group of seniors, to be that sort of person who's like, yeah, this, like he or she, like they really know Python or they know JavaScript or something like that. I always go to that person, like they usually have a really good handle on this sort of thing. That's when you're starting to get into the expert domain, because now you're above the people who are considered to be the standard unit of professionalism within the industry, and that standard unit is the senior. The senior that's the base unit for most companies. It's a very hard thing to define what a senior is, but that's usually the way it goes. And I think, as I said, this is it's an extremely similar thing to the Kung Fu Masters analogy, because let's take JavaScript as an example. You have so many different areas of expertise within that language that it's impossible for someone to know all of it. I mean, there are so many areas. You can be a front-end expert, you can be a back-end expert, you can be a machine learning expert. Like, there's tons of these different angles that you could have on such a language, and it's being an expert in that area. You may be an expert in that area, but you cannot. That doesn't mean that you're an expert just across the board. And that's something that I find extremely funny, because there are these fanboys out there who will look at certain programmers as if you should know everything about everything. And this is like, even technical people. I know for a fact that there are many of these who are like, I know for a fact that a lot of the like profiles out there on the internet that people look up to in programming, I know that they don't have the answer to every question just in their head. They write blog posts and they research things to make a good content. But that doesn't mean that if I walk up to them on the street and I ask them a bunch of complicated questions, that hey, they're gonna know about it. So basically what I'm saying is that you become an expert by getting to a level where you are above average within the senior field. That's the best way I can describe it. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So what I want you to take away from this is that you know that you're an expert in your programming language when you are considered to have more knowledge than the seniors that you work with. Or with, like, when you have more knowledge than the average senior. Because when you get to that point, that means that you've actually practiced to the point where you can actually teach the people that we can think of as the standard unit. Like, these are the people who are seniors, like the people who most companies are looking for, and their skill levels usually needs to be a fairly equal playing field. They need to know quite a few things. So if you can teach them, then you are definitely an expert, and then you're in a position where companies would pay you to come and teach their staff. That sort of level, that's what I would define as an expert. But you can of course define it as you need to be an industry leader or a thought leader or like a core contributor of a language. But I don't think that's a very different thing. That's the difference between being a professional singer and being one of the greatest singers of all time, right? There's a gap there as well, right? In my world, being an expert is a bigger area than being the best of the best at something. So hopefully this answers your question. Have a great day.